This looks pretty good. In this video, I am going to be doing a study of the Bible from the original languages of Greek and Hebrew. In this video, I've already done Psalm 1 from the Hebrew. Now I'm doing Psalm 2, the first part of Psalm 2. I'm trying to keep these fairly short. In this psalm, we are seeing a plot against a coronated or a king that is being coronated. And there is this plot going on that they do not want him to reign. And so we see the kings surrounding the anointed one in a plot to overthrow his coronation. Some have applied this to 2 Samuel 5:17, when the Philistines heard that David was going to be anointed king over Israel. They went up against David. We don't know. That could be one application or one interpretation. But following the plot, God then will deride what they're doing from heaven, will laugh at their efforts. But then, following that, God has made a decree that his son would reign, that his Messiah would indeed still reign in spite of all the plots against him. This is followed then by the king himself speaking, saying, "The Lord has anointed me, and as a result, this day, he said, I have begotten you." And so we'll see that, followed then by the encouragement to the kings to stop their rebellion. So I'm going to read it from the Hebrew and try to do a brief study of the psalm from the original languages, or from the original language of Hebrew. So we begin, Lama Rakashu Goyim, Uleumim Yegu Rig. Why are the nations in an uproar? And why do the peoples meditate a vain thing? Yit Yatzavu Malchei Eretz Verozanim Nosadu Yachad Al Adonai Ve'al Mashiach. The kings of the earth take their stand up, and the rulers are taking counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed. And here's what they say. Nineptika et moserotemo, venashlicha mimenu avotemo. Let us break their bands asunder. Let us cast their cords from us. In other words, they don't want this king to reign over them. And what is interesting, as we look at the Bible, and especially in the New Testament, with reference to this, we have in the book of Acts a reference to this very text. In verse 25, it follows that David spoke and said, Inati afluak sen ethne. Why are the nations in an uproar? I'm reading from the Greek, which is a quote from the Septuagint. Kai laoi emelete san kena. And the peoples are meditating a vain thing. Pereste san hoi basiles tes. The kings of the earth take their stand. Kai hoi arkantes sunekte san epi ta alta. And the rulers are gathered together. Kata tu kiriu kai kata tu Christu autu, against the Lord and against his Christ, against his anointed. And he goes on to apply it to the cross. Sunekte son gar ep aletheos, they were gathered together of a truth, ente pale taute epitan hagian padai su Yesun chan ekrisos. They were gathered together in that city against your child Jesus, whom you anointed, Herod, Herodes, Tekai, Pontius Pilatus, and Pontius Pilate, soon ethnisen kai laois, with the nations, or the Gentiles, and the peoples of Israel, poiesai hasa he kersu kai he bule su praorisen genestai. They were gathered together to do whatsoever your hand and your will had predetermined to occur. God had already predetermined what would happen, looking at in the New Testament application at Christ on the cross. So while it had a first meaning, its secondary or final meaning is looking at the cross through New Testament application. Kaitanun Kyria epide epitas apelas auton. Now, Lord, look upon what they're doing and give to your servants with boldness. Kaidas tois doulois su meta paresias, with boldness to speak your word, with all boldness. La lane tan lagan su. And so it goes on, and that stretch forth your hand in to tain kerasu ek tainin, say unto healing and signs and wonders to happen through the name of your child Jesus. In other words, Luke goes on to write, Ace asin kai semea kai terata genestai dia tu anamatas tu hagiu paidasu Jesus. In other words, stretch forth your hands and set forth the wonders that Jesus would accomplish. And of course, that happened in the life of our Lord and what he did accomplish. And the whole place was shaken, we're told. And so what I see here in this first movement of Psalm chapter 2, in its New Testament application, I want to look at the historical. We're not sure. It could have been when David was coronated. But in the New Testament final application, it points to the cross and the revolt that takes place according to Luke, and he applies it in that way. As we work through the rest of the psalm, we'll see God's determination that his son would reign, and then we'll see the son speaking, which in the New Testament will be applied again to Christ in his ultimate glorious resurrection and his second coming.